So welcome everyone. We have an awesome cast for you. We're going to be breaking down whether or not we feel like gym leaders should stay as a game design aspect. Um, those of you who have heard the cast before know that I absolutely adore Alola, despite some serious flaws in the game, which is part of what inspired this. But to start off, I know we had our introductory chat, but I would love to start with you, Archaic. Can you please say who you are, what your role is, and anything that you are particularly excited about discussing today?
I'm Archaic. I'm the webmaster of Bulbagarden. Been around since the late 1990s in this fandom. And I guess my attitude towards gym leaders overall is I don't know if you need to keep them, but you need something to play a similar role because gym leaders are just Pokemon's manifestation of the JRPG trope of every dungeon having an end boss.
Thank you. And then Fitzy.
Hey, I'm Fitzy, and I just saw that the pollsters think that I'm wrong and Misty is more iconic. Sorry, had to comment on that. Uh, I'm Fitzy. I am one of the social media managers here at Bulba Garden. I've not been around quite as long as Archaic, the man who is in charge of everything. But I have also been a Pokemon fan since the 90s. Um, and I think gym leaders are awesome. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
And I also want to give out a special shout out to Caps, who is our producer, who's helped out with so many of the technical things and is going to be letting us know your thoughts as we progress through the conversation. But yep, Caps, you are welcome to say hello if you would like.
Hello, I'm the Caps fan. I'm the deputy multimedia executive here at Bulba Garden. I stream on Twitch. I also serve as a forums administrator, and I'm really happy to be here.
And then for those of you who may not know, or those who you know, I am Rhodehawk. I am the consistent host of these Bulbacast for a while now. I want to say hello to all of you. If you would like, I think Fitzy deserves some special kudos for graduating college. So if you want to send some love that way, I'm sure it's welcome. But as we get into this, so we have kind of a complex conversation here as there is so much around gym leaders. They are so iconic. So my first real question, and this is a doozy of a question, so I can always fill in where needed. But between Gen 9 between Gen 1 and Gen 9, what gym leader stuck with you the most? Good and bad. And I'll actually go first because I feel like I can personify a lot of the people who have played Johto. Um, the Johto gym leader, what is her name? Second gym. Whitney. I cannot stand Whitney's to this day. I am part of the Miltank PTSD group. I remember playing through Johto, which Johto is a great game, but oddly paced. And going from Bugsy to Whitney, just that was an intense battle. I will say good. I think one of my all-time favorite gym leaders is gonna have to be Wallace. I have so many that I love, but Wallace in particular, I love the whole narrative arc that he had from gym leader, like 8th gym leader, to uh, champion, and then he's gotten some really good love in Pokemon Masters and some other projects. And I also feel like he has just got such a cool design, and I feel like it suits so well into the idea of being a unique gym leader. Plus, he's a fun, complicated water type trainer who we don't always get. And Fitzy, I'm actually going to start with you.
All right. So this is the gym leaders that have stuck with me for good or bad.
Yeah, the most. So, like, one good, one bad.
All right. Bad is easy. I anyone who talks to me on Bulba Garden's Discord, shout out to our Discord, knows that actually a gym leader is my least favorite character in the entire Pokemon franchise, and that is Marlin from Black 2 and White 2. I think he is and it kind of sucks because I think he's a great character in the anime. I enjoyed his turn in the anime, but in the games, Black and White were the first games that really established that the gym leaders were kind of like the region's leaders. Like they're the ones who oversee the region. Um, as far as I could tell, Black and White like established that when the gym leaders took on Team Plasma in the end game. And then you get to Black 2, White 2, and you have everything that happened in Black and White, and then new Team Plasma has destroyed an entire city. And when your character asks Marlin for help, Marlin's response is, "Hey, I'm not going to stop these guys just because other people tell me that they're bad." And it's like, dude, if you don't know they're bad, you're not paying attention. And it just, it infuriated me when I first played the game. So I got to go with Marlin as the bad gym leader.
That sounds very appropriate for a region based on the US and politics in the US.
For a good gym leader that stuck with me, this one I'm gonna have to branch out from the games a little bit because a lot of the gym leaders, it would be so hard for me to pick a good gym leader, like one good gym leader going just off the games. But I think if I include their representation in the anime, I really loved all of the gym leaders in Kalos, but especially Grant. There's just something about Grant in the anime. He was so personable and approachable, and he just exuded a mentor energy without being like stuffy about it. He was just a cool guy. And like of all the gym leaders represented on the anime, I think Grant is the one I'd like to like go out to a bar and have a drink with.
Yeah, and I have to add just one quick note. And I think this is a fairly common debate, or topic of conversation slash debate. Marlin also doesn't get very much love in Black and White too. If I remember correctly, he kind of just shows up. And in a region that did so many cool things, as you said, Fitzy, with the gym leaders, I feel like he's kind of a sticky note on the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But okay, what about you?
I'm tempted to go with what you said for the one that stuck with me negatively. And long time fans of Bulba may know that I ran monobug teams in Gen 1 and Gen 2. That was my way of making the game more challenging for myself. And Miltank and Rollout against Monobug was not pleasant.
That doesn't sound pleasant.
No. That was, without a doubt, the most challenging battle I had to go through in the entire game. I think in the end I may have beaten it just by grinding out my bugs to a higher level. I think I just got so frustrated with it. That was annoying. the one that stuck with me is probably Sabrina. Not just because... So, for a few reasons. So, on the one hand, you've got the anime representation of Sabrina, which was like a stark contrast to how the gym leaders had been shown in the anime up to that point. You basically got to actually have multiple episodes with that gym leader. They beat Ash once, didn't they? And then he had to go get the Haunter? Yeah. So he actually lost. I was just trying to remember. Wait a second. Did they actually beat them, or did Ash just go, no, I can't possibly beat her unless I get Ghost? No, but yeah, they actually beat Ash. So forcing a multi-episode long like mini arc to go get the Ghost, which didn't even make sense with how the type matchups actually worked in Gen 1. But whatever. That was how they were supposed to work. And then in later games, Sabrina's not just been a one note. Like, a lot of the gym leaders who we've seen again have basically just been the same as before, right? But we've seen Sabrina, like, I mean, she's actually had real redesigns to her outfits. She has the whole thing with her in PokerStar Studios as Bella Bell. So Bella Belelba. Like, so she feels like more of a living character than many of the other gym leaders.
I forgot she was in PokerStar.
I will also add, being a young kid watching the Sabrina episodes of the Kanto anime, and doesn't she like turn Ash's companions into dolls
And her
like,
mom.
play with them? Yeah, it was a creepy couple of episodes. I will also say, and Archaic, I'm sure you'll know this, but doesn't and the Johto remakes, doesn't Whitney get milk drink on her milk tank as well?
Sounds about right. I would honestly have to double check that. Sounds about right.
I think
You are
I
correct.
remember that.
Just checked Bulbapedia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which already makes an intensely hard battle even worse because now she has reliable heal. And I think she also gets attract, which is obviously I have opinions about Whitney.
Would make
But
a tough battle even tougher, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the ridiculous thing is, like, the rematch against Whitney is pretty trivial. But that initial match, like, the Clefairy isn't even much. But in a match where you're restricted in which Pokemon you can use, the Miltank is not a hard counter as such, but it is the closest they can get to a hard counter to a lot of the Pokemon that you could use. And I think, like, would Torchic get, or Combuskin, actually, would you even be evolved to Combuskin by that point? I don't think so. Would you have any
Maybe.
fighting type moves? Like, I mean, even if you do, Miltank still has super effective move against you in rollout. So,
do you mean Quilava?
oh yes, it is Quilava. What am I talking about? Oh jeez, I'm half asleep. Okay, so are there any Pokemon with a fighting type move at that point in the game?
I will also say her attitude towards losing is also obnoxious.
Yeah.
But
To
Like the
add on
fact I
that
don't know why
point,
Johto had two gym leaders that throw a fit and run away.
yeah, I
Beat
was gonna
them.
say if I can put my 2 cents forward for the one that I dislike, it's probably
Of course.
Claire. Because at least with Whitney, her kind of crying and like not giving you the gym badge is within her character. And it is within Claire's character as well, to be fair. But I don't know, it feels so much more of like a punch in the face for them to be like, oh no, she's just gonna be a jerk and just run away and not give it to you. Rather than Whitney just kind of crying, you kind of feel like maybe a little bad. But Claire just does not give you the light of day at all. Is just really elitist. Even though you beat her, it's just I'm not a huge fan of Claire at all.
Also, just to Whitney's credit, like if you try to leave, the gym trainer that's right by her is like, "Hey, she just gets upset when she loses. She'll be over it in a minute," and she gets over it in a minute. Claire is a whole different thing.
Yeah, she goes and complains to her grandfather and is like, "Grandfather, I lost." And then the grandfather's like, "No, it's okay. You need to give the gym badge, please." Like that whole family is just so spoiled.
Right now, I have this mental image of Lance as being like this snooty private school kid who thinks he's better than everyone just because his family pays a ridiculous amount of money for the schooling instead of sending him to public school.
I mean, in the Adventures manga, he goes full on megalomaniac.
Well, in Adventures, he's what, Team Rocket
No,
leader, isn't he? Or
he's
was
the
that
Elite
no?
Four, but the Elite Four try to destroy the world
Oh,
after the
okay.
rocket arc.
Oh, that's right. It's the gym leaders who are Rocket leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, let's get into it. So gym leaders as a whole, very iconic part of Pokemon. Um, and this question is gonna be a little blunt for the sake of the conversation, and then it'll be a little softer follow up. But do we feel like gym leaders are overused? And because of that, do we feel like Pokemon is actually acknowledging this? And I'll go to you, Archaic.
I'd flip the question. Is the problem not that they're overused, but that they're underused or had been underused? Like, I mean, at the beginning, I said that gym leaders are the equivalent of dungeon bosses, right? I mean, you've got like your Legend of Zelda with your 8 dungeons, and you got a boss at the end of them, and you fight that boss at the end of the dungeon, and then you never see that boss again. And what are the gyms functionally but just the dungeons? They're there to plot where you are in the story. And you get the little reward that lets you power up even further. So, what makes them better in the more recent games is that they're not just the one note we only see them in the gym and never again, but we've actually had some involvement of gym leaders in the story beyond the gym. So I think using them more would actually make them more meaningful rather than having them just be the equivalent of a dungeon boss.
I love that point. And to follow up in that, would Archaic, would you prefer that gyms be expanded upon, or would you prefer them be set in other locations, kind of like how Legends Arceus had us battle gym leaders in the actual nature that they were known for?
Well, I mean, it wasn't exactly gym leaders in Legends, but um, I mean, I think gyms or whatever the functional equivalent of them in a game should be located in locations that make sense for the universe of that game. I think for the modern setting ones, it makes perfect sense to have them in the cities for the large part. In in Legends Arceus, it made perfect sense for them to be more connected to nature. Or with Alola and having the trial captains and totem Pokemon replacing it. I mean, that again made sense in the context of the islands, them not having an official league at that point, etc. I don't think the locations are the problem. I think it's just memorable characters and getting them involved. Let's put it this way. Can you remember every single gym leader?
Probably.
I mean, I certainly can't. I can remember them from Gen 1 and maybe Gen 2, but past that, I've forgotten most of them. Because after I beat them in the game, they're just like, oh, well, they're done.
And Fitzy, I know that you have opinions. We have chatted about it, and we're super excited to hear them. But going off of that, to modify that, do you, based on what Archaic said, do you feel like gym leaders are overused, or do you feel they are underused?
I think my answer is going to waffle a little bit. I love gym leaders. I am very much the type of gamer who gets comfortable with a franchise, and when a franchise gives me what I like, I will stick with that franchise. And Pokemon gives me what I like, and I like traveling the region. I like collecting 8 badges. I like taking on the Elite Four. I love the gym leader system. The one thing, and I think this kind of relates to what Archaic said, is while I am happy with the gym leader system, I am also very happy that they have started using the gym leaders more as characters, and also that they made, in my opinion at least, the gym challenges a lot more interesting. It's not just fight 3 trainers on your way to the gym leader. There's puzzles involved. They feel thematic to the gym leader. And to be clear, I am perfectly fine with Pokemon experimenting with the formula. I liked the Nobles in Legends Arceus. I enjoyed most of the Totem Pokemon in Alola. But I remember when Sun and Moon came out and there were no gym leaders, and at the very least, the fact that there was an Elite Four was not in the marketing. It was kind of meant to be a reveal in the game. It had me worried about where Pokemon was going, because it was well, this isn't my Pokemon. This is a Pokemon game, but this isn't my Pokemon. So I'm very happy that I am fine with them experimenting as long as they don't completely forget their roots in the gym leader equation.
I can definitely agree with that. And Archaic, you are right. I typically think of the main trainer battles as gym leaders just due to my own perception of the game. But moving into that, diving into that a little bit more with this aspect, do you feel like gym leaders are necessary at this point to also honor what you said, Fitzy, around the idea that they have changed the formula? They have shaped up a lot of this concept of what Pokemon can be. I will add in Legends Arceus, where there are prominent trainer battles. I did like that they were different and they had that distinction within the game. And for me, as I've stated so many times just on this cast, I love the concept of there aren't gyms in Alola. For me, that was very cool. I felt like it gave the region, like the natural region, a little bit more care. but based on everything, I'd say I think it would be safe to say that Pokemon could push it out of stealth. It could move away from gym leaders as though they are a component but not necessary. But Fitzy, do you feel they are necessary?
Um, I feel, like I said, I think that they are a key part of Pokemon's formula. And I know not everyone is invested in the formula the way I am. But I play Pokemon as a comfort game. I've played Pokemon since the day Red and Blue came out in the West. And they're the games I go back to because they're not very hard. This is a safe space. I think they're not very hard games, but they're a lot of fun. They have some. Thank you, Joe. I am old. um, but I go to Pokemon because Pokemon is a safe space for me. When I am down, Pokemon brings me back up, and a lot of that is it's like putting on an old, worn-in pair of shoes that are just perfectly molded to your feet. And every time Pokemon deviates from the formula, I always end up enjoying myself. But there is always that bit of what happened. Like I said, I'm happy if they experiment as long as they come back to it, and I think it's necessary that they come back to it because I fully believe, and I don't like speaking for other people, but I am willing to bet I'm not the only person who comes to Pokemon for that comfort factor. Um, and takes comfort in knowing that when I fire up a Pokemon game, I'm going to pick a fire, grass, or water starter. I'm going to take on 8 gym leaders, and I'm going to be the champion. So I think, yeah, not required all the time, but definitely required.
I mean, I think this is why the Legends series is so important in that it allows them to have a clear separation between their more experimental games and the traditional main series games that they know that a lot of the Pokemon fandom really want. And I mean, like you compare it to something like Legend of Zelda, right? And Legend of Zelda has more so than a number of other Nintendo franchises grown with the audience while still acknowledging that every game they're getting in new players. I mean, Breath of the Wild was its experimental game, and for all that people were going, "Oh no, we don't have dungeons," it's like, well, no, you've got 4 of them, and then a whole bunch of mini dungeons. The concept of dungeon hasn't gone away. You've still got these big dungeons with big bosses at the end of them. You've just got the shrines as well, and like even in its experimentation, like Pokemon hasn't abandoned the general concept of gym leaders. They've just replaced them with trial captains or the noble Pokemon, or like things that essentially function the same in that they are like things that you have to complete to progress the game. That they are roadblocks you must overcome, both to make your team stronger and to actually move on in the story. So, like, I mean, I think you're right that they're not going to abandon the traditional Pokemon game, like especially given that Pokemon, maybe more so than a lot of other franchises, is expecting that the majority of players of each new generation of games are going to be new players. So I think now that we do have Legends, we're not going to see as much of a shake-up to that core formula in the core games. But I mean, like we said earlier, I hope to see an expansion to that formula.
Well, and I think there is so many great points that have been made. So much of it similar, so much of it a little different. And I just want to honor you, Fitzy, really quickly. I agree. Pokemon is one of my safe zones. It's the game I turn on to. It's one of the few games that I can play for hours. And I agree that familiarity is important. And I think that so much of what you said is so wise, and Pokemon being a comfort game or a safe zone is so true for so much of the community. And I also want to highlight Archaic. I think you made some great points around the philosophy of the game's growing is a good thing, and the evolution of things, as long as there are those hurdles, are so important. And in that, I think that's kind of what has always made Pokemon special in its own way. It doesn't always change drastically, but its changes are significant and they are important. And I know we've been chatting a bit, and we have some people in the chat who have, I'm sure, some wonderful thoughts. So I'd love to open that up to our time to talk to some of the audience, Caps, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a couple of highlights from chat. Snowy did mention right at the beginning when we were talking about kind of like I think when we were leading in a little bit, we had talked about how gym leaders are kind of the, Pokemon equivalent of like a dungeon boss or end of dungeon kind of completion thing, right? Snowy was thinking that, replacing gym leaders with dungeons and dungeon bosses for a game or two could be really fun. I mean, I would see this for sure happening in like a spin-off. I feel like that would be really cool. It would be really bold of them to kind of make that kind of almost Dragon Quest style switch in game design and boss design in the main series. I would be really interested to see what that is. Another highlight.
Arguably, you could say Pokemon has done that before in a side series, because that's effectively what you had in Ranger, wasn't
Yep,
it?
and Mystery Dungeon to an extent too in the main series or in the main story. Um, but I did want to take a second to highlight a couple other comments. There's a lot of hate for Marlin. I really did not realize how much hate there was for Marlin across the community. I mean, I personally don't really care for him either, but I didn't realize he was so like universally hated. So that's one point. And then just on the topic of underutilization versus overutilization, I think both Quagsire Joe and It's Tiffany in chat both mentioned that they'd like to see the gym leaders be a little bit more integrated into the stories of the games. And I think that's really important, right? Because these are your trainers that are your main characters, almost not necessarily main characters, I guess, like side characters, but important characters nonetheless. And you'd want to see them, care a little bit more about the goings on of the common folk, for lack of a better term, and be a little bit more integrated into the world and what's going on in the story at that point. And again, I think we touched on this before, but one game that did this really well was Pokemon Black and White. The gym leaders, it felt like each gym leader in Pokemon Black and White kind of had their moment to shine a little bit. You either do a side quest with them, for them, or something related to them, you know. Um, but and then at the end, they all come together and help you fight the evil team. So, I mean, that's like I think a direction that I'd like to see Pokemon go as well. Just some interesting thoughts from the chat.
I would also add, I know that I have gone on the record at being frustrated with Paldea's city, like cities in general. But now that I'm thinking of Unova, I will say, to add to the credit of gym leaders in Paldea, partly because the cities are so underwhelming, the gym leaders I feel like do feel like more significant to the cities around them. Like Iono is able to take over the entire city's like security system to find people. Um, like Briar, I think is the name of the grass gym leader. He never wowed me all that much, but his art is seen all over the city. Like his entire gym challenge, like Fitzy said, is a big part of the city.
You mean
And
Brassius?
Gracias, thank you. And
Briar's the the woman who takes you around in the DLC from Blueberry Academy.
Oh, yes. But I will say, like, I also feel like a lot of the like less significant gym leaders, like Grusha, it isn't a big part of a city, but it kind of fits with the fact that Grusha is, dealing with his own trauma and is so depressed that he's isolated himself on this massive mountain. So I should backpedal a little bit and give some special highlight to the fact that Paldea gym leaders do feel a little bit more natural to me. Yeah.
I mean, without going into spoilers, Paldea's gym leaders seem to be very involved in stuff in the Horizons anime. So, like, I didn't feel all of the gym leaders in Paldea were as involved as they could have been in the games. And I was actually a bit disappointed with some of them in that, like, well, the lack of, shall we say, gym trainers and so forth, and that it was really just go and fight the gym leader directly. I mean, that's how it felt, at least. Like, I didn't like that aspect of it, but the gym leaders themselves, when given the opportunity to show their personality, really felt like they did have personality. Even Larry, where his personality is...
Larry just is archaic.
Sorry, you're saying Larry just is, or that you're saying Larry's me?
Larry is you.
I mean,
Larry
the
is all
sad
of
thing
us.
is he's got more hair than me.
You and me both.
But
No,
while
Larry is
we're
all of
talking
us.
about gym leaders as people, I know Caps is the one who updates us on what the chat says, but I did notice Quagsire Joe mentioning not that Larry didn't really land for him. I don't remember exactly how Joe said it. He never really got all the Larry hype. And I remember thinking, because Joe is younger than me, as he pointed out, I am quite old, coming up on 40 now. But I thought it was really a lot of millennial Pokemon fans, which I think all of us are. Uh, we're really happy to see Larry because Larry was the perfect representation of I've been at work all day and now I'm home to play Pokemon, but I'm just so tired. And it felt for the first time in a long time that Pokemon acknowledged that people like us play the game. Um, as Archaic said, unlike, say, Legend of Zelda, Pokemon doesn't really age with its fan base. It stays with its target fan base, and those of us who play as adults are just still hanging on. But for the first time, I really felt seen as a Pokemon fan for the first time in years.
I will also add onto the Larry discussion, and I think we're gonna have to move on. Pokemon Masters did just have a really great Larry and Kabu um, event centered around both of them and how they're both middle-aged men who, one of them, Kabu, being like the extreme opposite of Larry. And I will say their interactions between each other is fantastic. And I will say, having beat Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I had a lot more appreciation for Larry when I realized he was a gym leader and then his secondary job, just in case anyone has not played the game all the way through. It's been around for a while, but I had much more appreciation for him after that. But diving
Not
into
even a
that,
secondary job. It's still for the same organization, which makes it even worse. He's working for a black company. Get out of there! Stop letting yourself be overworked and underpaid.
Larry is the epitome of everyone who has had to work in things that are simply just not in their job description.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know?
People have compared him to like those people who are working multiple jobs to make ends meet and like have a part-time job on top of their full-time job. But like, no, he has 2 full-time jobs at the same organization. My father did that when I was younger, and he was working from like 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. 5 days a week. And I mean, it was insane and it was bringing back good money doing it, but like, why would you put yourself through that?
I feel like we could do a whole Larry-centric Bulbacast.
Hey,
Just
I'll admit, I want to learn more about Larry. Like, does he have kids? Does he have a wife and kids? Or is he just so overworked that he can't find a relationship? Eh, like,
I feel like he's got it. I will say this, and we're gonna have to start moving on. But I feel like he's also a commentary on the competitive Pokemon scene. With having to make two high-powered teams that are radically different, and just how exhausting that can be.
oh, I mean, it's not as anywhere near as exhausting as it used to be. If that was meant as a commentary on competitive Pokemon, I don't think that's landed as well as it could have. I think actually, like, I think Kieran is more of a commentary on the competitive Pokemon scene, but perhaps we shouldn't go there.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah. All right. So we will definitely check back in with the Twitch chat here in a moment. But to move into our next couple questions, I'm gonna ask everyone here, Alola or Hisui? Who do we feel like which region or game uh best deviated from the gym leader aesthetic?
Hisui. I felt when Alola came out, like I said, I was a bit worried that they were permanently pivoting away from gym leaders. But the way they pivoted away from gym leaders, to me at least, it felt like they were saying, "We're not going to have gym leaders, but here's gym leaders." Like it was different, but not really that different. Um, Whereas Hisui went all in on deviating from the formula. You had the fights with the members of the two tribes. You had the noble Pokemon, and those were completely different mechanics. Like you were actually fighting the Pokemon with those little statues you threw at them. Um, I feel like because with Alola and the Island Challenge, there is inevitably going to be comparisons to the gym leaders because they're gyms. You do a challenge in the area that's thematic to the type, and then you get a little prize item that is related to that type. They were gyms, but not gyms. Whereas Hisui really took the idea of doing something different and ran with it.
What about you, Archaic?
I'm not sure either really did it better than the other, to be perfectly honest. I felt like they were both thematic changes to the idea of gyms, but that they didn't, from a game design standpoint, really make all that fundamental of a change to the basic idea. They just dressed it up a little differently. And, I mean, would they have done better in some aspects? I don't know, maybe, but I mean, particularly given that it was their first go and that the trial captains have been way more memorable than the gym leaders. Like, I still remember all the trial captains. I don't remember all the gym leaders of the generation before it, and I would probably struggle actually to remember all of the Scarlet and Violet gym leaders off the top of my head. So now, to be fair, some of this is just because they integrated the trial captains into the anime way more than they've done gym leaders before or since. But like, as characters, they feel much more alive. So, like, not just looking at them in the games, but looking at them the whole franchise as a whole, I don't really have any complaints about the trial captains. So yeah, I think they both had their strengths and weaknesses, is how I'll put it.
All right. And so this next question, I'm gonna prompt our audience. If you're still here, still listening, either on YouTube or Twitch at this point, I'm also gonna ask the audience here after I get through a couple things of my own opinions. But for audience, for cast, what do you think would best replace gym leaders? And I'm gonna be honest with you, I would either love to see an evolution of the totem Pokemon, kind of like how Paldea kind of did and Hisui kind of did. They had a mix between that and Paldea. But what I would personally love is the idea to change it so that, like Archaic said, like Fitzy said at one point, to make it a bit more thematic. My hope would be if they don't have gym leaders, I think it'd be really cool to deal with either Pokemon or something I thought would be really cool would be more NPCs within the world that you have to battle. Or I've seen this talked about like battling evil teams or like local criminals doing investigative things. I love Pokemon for story, like for battles, not as much as stories, but I love the stories. But I'd love to kind of see the world around them be fleshed out, get to know more people, experience the region a bit more. So if you have a thought, let me know. But I'm actually going to go to Fitzy to start this one off.
What I would love to see gym leaders replaced with. Um, I'd like to see them take more chances with gym leaders. But if they were going to have a game where gym leaders were replaced with something else, and I've talked about this before, I don't know if I've ever talked about it on cast, but my like ideal dream Pokemon game would be a Pokemon coordinator game. And I think it would be really cool to have a game where contests were the focus and you had to, like, rather than working your way through a bunch of gyms and establishing your dominance, working your way up to the top of the contest world and having rivals that moved along with you, and almost kind of like mixing the rival and the gym leader type thing. Uh, it would be kind of like how the contest rivals are in the anime. Dawn's rivals, May's rivals, even Serena's rivals, even though her contests weren't contests. The idea that like you're getting better and you still have to beat people and collect the plot keys. But the people that you're beating to get the plot keys remain the same people. And seeing the growth of the gym leader equivalents alongside you, I think would be really cool.
And Archaic, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm not sure I want to see gym leaders replaced so much as we're not really talking about the replacement of gym leaders. We're talking about something taking on the role of the gym leaders. Yeah, like Totem Pokemon aren't gym leaders, but they effectively take on the from a game design standpoint the same kind of deal. I think there's many different things that could potentially take the place of gym leaders from a game design standpoint. I mean, personally, what I think is more interesting is what could replace gym leaders from a story design standpoint, especially as we're seeing gym leaders become more a part of this living Pokemon world. And I felt like maybe the most interesting twist they had there that they never really developed was this idea that there is not just one tier of gyms. Like we actually had this going all the way back to like the fighting dojo in the first generation, and some of the stuff that was shown in the anime there with this idea that there were more gyms than just the 8 we'd seen. Like even what Gary had 16 badges or something like that, and they were supposedly from that region. So, and they kind of brought the idea back a little bit in Sword and Shield's DLC, where we've got these minor league gym leaders. And I'm just thinking, why is it that we're always going up against the major league of Pokemon gym leaders from the very beginning, and to this point where we've developed the idea that the gym leaders aren't really taking these fights seriously, they're using like their lesser teams of Pokemon rather than their aces, etc. Because otherwise, of course, they'd wipe the floor with a newbie trainer. And why not be like, why not have us progress through the leagues effectively? And we start off as a rank newbie, and maybe we're doing quite a lot of traveling. Like, if you think of a lot of open world RPGs, that they often have these kind of like artificial roadblocks, and like you're in this starting area, but right over there you can see these enemies that are higher level, and you theoretically could go over there, but you know it's dangerous and you know you really shouldn't. And like, why not have something like that in Pokemon, so we're not just basically traveling in a circle around the region until we go to wherever the Elite Four are, but something so we're actually incentivized to come back to areas, to go off into like the sub areas that we didn't explore before because they were beyond us. And so we do actually have, like, we challenge these minor leagues, and then being recognized as a up and coming trainer, now we're able to challenge the higher level people, and in doing so this would give more opportunities for some of those higher level people to stay involved in the story, either because they're either because we've got people who are growing alongside us, or because we've got these like mentor figures for ourselves or these other trainers who are involved in the story. Like, I mean, I think I'm kind of coming back to what I said at the beginning, in that I don't think we have a problem of gym leaders being overused. I think we actually have a problem of their potential not being used enough. And I think the issue is maybe that we probably do still want to have gym leaders, but we want to completely rethink the traditional gym journey.
Well, I think to add to that is you made me think about something that I did love about Galar. It's a very small detail. But one thing I really appreciated about Galar, I wish they had used this a little more too, because I said for years, not necessarily on casts, but the fact that going through the 8 gyms since like Kanto and ending up in the Elite Four and then becoming champion and the game's essentially done never felt really all that satisfying to me as I got older. So when Galar implemented like the idea of the implied rivals going against you and traveling through the towns and those little trainers they would have scattered throughout the gyms, and as you got to the higher and higher gyms, there would be less and less of them. I really like that. I wish they had done something more like that, and honestly, I think it'd be really cool if we expanded the idea of what a rival was in gym leaders, but in Pokemon, that's a whole other discussion. And we've actually blown through the next couple of questions. But what I actually would love to ask, I know, Archaic, you touched on this a bit. Fitzy, I think you touched on yours a bit. But do you both feel like, Fitzy with the coordinator game or Archaic with this evolution of the idea that gym leaders could be more than the 8, we could travel more? Do you both feel like your idea would have the same kind of staying power as gym leaders? I know, Archaic, it's a little different, so I'd ask you, do you think that this new method could stick around long enough as this evolution of gym leaders?
I think it could. The issue is that it's probably requiring more effort. And like, I'm not yet convinced that Pokemon Company is willing to make a game of that kind of length with that kind of with that much focus on developing a story over a long period of time. Like, let's be honest, most of the gameplay loop for Pokemon does not come from the actual story elements of the game. It comes from training and battling wild Pokemon. So most of your time spent playing the game is spent battling Pokemon. Expanding the story side of things would be a dramatic change from that design philosophy, probably require a lot more work. As much as I'd love to see it, I also fear it's probably the kind of thing they'd see as appealing more to the older Pokemon fans and unnecessary for them to do stuff for younger fans. So, like, could it have staying power? Sure, it has the potential, but it's probably more the kind of thing we'd see in a side series done for older fans rather than it as a main series thing, I fear.
And Fitzy, with your idea, do you feel like it would have that staying power?
I think I would be hard pressed to say that any deviation from the formula would definitely have staying power. For two reasons. From a fan standpoint, I going back to what I said earlier about Pokemon being a comfort game for longtime fans, any deviation from that has at best like a 50-50 shot of being popular with the fan base. Uh, for as many people who would like a change, just as many people would possibly be upset by it because it's not what they want. And from a business standpoint, I think for better or for worse, the Pokemon Company seems to operate on the concept of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the gym leader formula, it ain't broke. It may not be the most popular thing, and not everyone loves it, but it sells games. So I don't know how well any deviation would last, but I think that there are enough fans of Ash's coordinator companions or people who do the coordinating in the games themselves, I think it would have as much staying power as any idea would have, because it is a recurring sub quest within the games.
Wonderful. And I know that time is flying by, and we are moving quickly, but I'd love to check in Caps. Has anybody responded on our Twitch side of things to that
Yeah.
question I brought up?
Oh, excuse me. Yeah. So we do have a couple of responses specifically to kind of what would you replace gym leaders with? That was the question that you posed to our audience. We have a couple of responses to that. Ungovernable, who you guys might know as Calvin on Bulbastaff, says that he's probably a bit of an old man yelling at clouds, so I don't want gym leaders to be changed, and then go back to the original method as to how they were done. Which I think, ties into what Fitzy, you were just saying about how, gym leaders are still popular, even if it might not be everyone's cup of tea, at this point, but they're still very popular, and I mean, they sell games, right? So, maybe, ideating on what we would change is not necessarily it's fun, but it might not be the most realistic thing. And then also Poke Delta mentioned replace gym leaders with a series of battle leagues which encourage the catching and using of a range of Pokemon rather than using a set team of 6, as Pokemon games are a catching game at heart. And I think that'd be a really interesting thing to kind of test a player's ability to master and understand the battle system. If you were able to, if you were, I guess not able to, but more kind of forced, if in an essence, to catch Pokemon and then immediately have to use them against a fellow trainer who's either had to go through the same thing or a set team of Pokemon. Give your give your kind of team building skills on the fly a little bit of a test, right? I think that would be really interesting to see, specifically as a potential implementation in a Legends game, right? Where maybe the gym leader format doesn't exist yet because the league doesn't exist yet, right? And so you're kind of going through and you've got this mix between the Legends gameplay, which is really catching focused, and the traditional battling, which would eventually become the standard in the region or whatever. So a couple of interesting points to be sure.
Yeah, I will say also, just speaking to what you were talking about, Fitzy, in terms of like the acceptance of the fan base, I actually think that's something they're not so concerned about, specifically because why do you need to worry about the acceptance of the fan base of existing fans if you're looking at it as every generation is a new batch of fans? I don't think they necessarily actually think about the existing fans much, if at all, when putting all of this together.
Yeah, that's why I discussed it in that two-pronged approach. I think the fan reaction to it and TPC's reaction to it would be two different things.
So, yeah, like it. Pokemon Company has shown they are willing to experiment, but at the same time, I think it's safe to say that Pokemon Company does not do a lot of experimentation. That they are risk averse, that they are, like you say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And when it comes to something that they are largely trying to make appeal to children, that if they have a formula that they know is working with children, why would they change it all that much? I will say I think perhaps there's a bit more of a willingness to change now because of the environment around how the games are promoted. In that, like, while they are targeting the games at kids, the people those kids are looking to see if the games are something they should be interested in are older influencers online who are looking themselves at different things. And so to satisfy the kids, you need to satisfy the older influencers who are telling them what makes a good game. So we may start to see a bit more being done to appease the older fans. But even there, I feel like change is going to be very slow. And it's mostly going to come from trying stuff out in Legends rather than immediately bringing it into the main series.
Yeah, that would be that's an interesting point of like, I think Legends has a unique space in the kind of scheme of things where it's kind of an experimentation on the core formula, but it would also allow for them to kind of experiment on different game design ideas as well, that may or may not work in the main series too. Yeah, I agree.
I would also add, I think it's very safe to say that Pokemon has probably changed more drastically in recent years with their recent games than I feel like they have for a long time, at least from someone who played Red and Blue all the way to like Hoenn. I feel like the amount of risk taking, the amount of changes to the formula, the amount of thought that is potentially either being given to older fans because they are older, or archaic, as you say, because there are influencers now, or whatever it may be. And I said this before on numerous casts. I feel like Pokemon, whether or not they're willing to, I feel like they're acknowledging that change has to happen. It's still moving very slowly. But I still hold the belief that Paldea, like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, could have been masterpieces in the Pokemon fandom if they had had the game actually work upon release. And um with this, and this is a whole other topic in and of itself, but the fact that we haven't gotten any major news about a new game and it is July, um, makes me think of the point that you've made in other casts as well, Archaic, that Pokemon Company may be changing up how it makes games on its own timeline. And
Well,
that,
they outright said after Worlds and uh, Presents in August last year that was what they were doing. I think it was August last year that they were taking that they were going to be taking longer to develop games rather than being at the blistering pace they were throughout much of the 2010s. Like slower development times, having the games more spaced out, and if they need like additional stuff in between, doing it as DLC rather than a whole new game, and being DLC meaning that they aren't beholden to the gym leader formula and can actually do different things within that. And actually, maybe that's a point that they don't need to abandon the gym leader formula because they are able to have that sort of experimentation now in DLC relatively safely compared to before, where like with Sun and Moon there was a bit of a reaction from fans going, what the heck's happening here? Doing it like this as a post-game thing is safer for them to do, and hopefully gives us much better games in the long term. But I mean, I'll just say this though, like, and making sure I stick within the bounds of gym leaders. Scarlet and Violet, what disappointed me was that we didn't really see much to do with the gyms. We got this challenge thing, which reminded me a bit of some of what we had, like Orange Islands in the anime and that sort of deal. We had a battle against the gym leader, and that was pretty much it. And I would have loved to have seen the gyms actually be more elaborate as part of making the towns more elaborate. Like the cities, let's be honest, they were menus that you had to walk between. We couldn't even enter the shops. It was, well, I mean, we couldn't see inside the shops, rather. It was, I mean, actually, let's put it this way. I couldn't enter people's houses and look through their trash for leftovers.
Bad.
Like,
And
what kind of self-respecting JRPG does not let me rifle through people's drawers?
Yeah, and I know, Archaic, you and I have both mused quite a bit about our frustration around that on cast alone, and that still bugs me to the point where I know I could rant about that for quite a while. But for the sake of time for our audience, I think I have like one really quick question, and we'll do our outro. As always, there's so much more than we can get up to, and if you're on YouTube, you're on Twitch, you want to see more of this discussion, let us know. We're just trying to be respectful of everyone's time. Um, I would love to ask you, and this is gonna be a big question, and I'm gonna open this up to not just main series games, not just well-known side games, and raise the question of what game proves that gym leaders can be deviated from. Um, I, I've mentioned many times I love the Colosseum games. I haven't played uh, Mystery Dungeon or Ranger as much, um, but I think the one that I've got to go to just to highlight, to give it some love, and even they did some homage to this with gym leaders, is Pokemon New Snap. I feel like that game was in nature very different than the main series games, but one of the things I love about that game is the beauty of the world around us, and that it offered challenges that were legitimately a breath of fresh air. Probably because it had been, I think, like 20 something years since the last game came out. But that was a huge point for me. And Fitzy, would you like to start on this one last question before we do our outro?
I think the game that best shows that the gym leaders can be deviated from is probably I'm going to go with Legends Arceus. Um, as I think it was you, Rhodehawk, mentioned it once or twice in this cast, it's a much more catching focused game. But on top of that, it's also more than I think any other Pokemon game, an exploration game. Um, the idea that it kind of similar to what you said with Snap. And yeah, they had these milestone bosses that you did for the story, but like I said, they didn't feel like gym leaders to me. But the world itself was such a character. And if any of our audience watched any of Maniacal Engineer's Legends Arceus series, just the act of walking around that world, exploring, seeing the Pokemon up close and personal, different ways of approaching the Pokemon, whether you're going to sneak up on them or if you're fighting the nobles directly. It was just, for me, it was a really cool take on what a Pokemon world could be. Beyond just collect 8 badges, become the champion. So I'd probably go with Legends as my pick.
And what about you, Archaic?
I mean, I think there's been plenty of good Pokemon games that didn't have gym leaders, but a lot of them diverged from the standard JRPG formula. I mean, Colosseum didn't, but Colosseum was, I would say, the closest to a dungeon crawler of the Pokemon games to date. It very much was. You went through these large enemy bases and fought a big boss character at the end of it. And to be fair, it had some of the most memorable bosses of the franchise in that respect. I mean, we still talk about Mirror Bee to this day. Legends was a different type of RPG, but it was still clearly an RPG. I mean, it's not. And let's put it this way: it's not a Pokemon Conquest or something like that. I do think it's actually very difficult to compare to saying like new Pokemon Snap, because that's not an apples to oranges comparison of Pokemon games, really. So, like, if we're just comparing actual straight RPGs, so no tactical RPGs like Conquest, straight RPGs, story-wise, we have had divergences from gym leaders, but game design-wise, we have always had something that fulfills the function of a gym leader, whether that is a dungeon boss or something else. So I'm not sure the Pokemon franchise has really experimented to that point yet, where it has tried to really diverge as much as it could from the straight kind of, here is your mini boss, now defeat them. So yeah, story wise, then yeah, sure, Legends, it's no question. But yeah, in terms of actually diverging from a proper game design standpoint, I'm not so sure about it.
All right.
Do you mind if I jump in here, Rhodehawk?
Oh, go right
Please do.
ahead.
So, I think that you guys took you guys meaning Archaic and Fitzy, Rhodehawk. I'm sure New Snap is a great example, but I have not played that game, so I cannot comment on it. But Archaic, you and Fitzy both took the two games that I was thinking of specifically, those being Legends Arceus as well as Pokemon Colosseum, being kind of proof that Pokemon as a JRPG can work without gym leaders. I'm gonna kind of look at it from a different angle here and kind of think about where Pokemon seems like it wants to go. Right? And so my answer to this is going to be Scarlet and Violet. Scarlet and Violet is very much an attempt at an open world game, but it's not a full diversion from what we had before, right? Obviously. It has gym leaders, it has gym leaders that are meant to be challenged in a certain order, right? But in addition to that, it also features, other things that might be, more commonplace in other open world games, such as the what are the totem Pokemon equivalents, right? I'm not talking specifically about the fact that, oh, it's a boss Pokemon. I'm more so talking about the fact that I think Pokemon like that, and implementations like that, where you have to defeat a boss to then get a tool that allows you to explore more in the world, right? I think that is something that down the line, if they really, really lean into that, they could potentially, build upon a more kind of classic open world design if that's what they're looking to do, because that's what open world games do, right? You have your main quests where if you gradually create, complete the main quests, you get tools that allow you to explore the world more, right? Which is the main focus of any open world game. I'm sorry, that's just that's my opinion, but I feel like it's truth, right? The main focus of an open world game is the world. It's to explore the world, right? So, I think in that sense, I can see how, potentially going forward in Gen 10, right? If they are looking to deviate and go more open world, right? Um I can see them pushing away from gym leaders and integrating more of those the giant Pokemon that will allow you to gain something that allows you to explore the world to a greater extent going forward. So that's my answer. A little bit long-winded, but hopefully it makes sense.
Can I make a counterpoint to that?
Sure you can.
Pokemon's handled that before through gym leaders. As in, you get something that allows you to explore the world further, so maybe the gym leaders are the ones who give you the PM or HM or however they're going to handle it this generation, that gives you what you need to actually go and visit that area you couldn't previously access. Or they certainly already give you the ability to control stronger Pokemon, which you need to go to the more dangerous zone with the higher leveled Pokemon and so
Sure.
forth.
I agree with you. In the past, the gates and keys were the gym leaders, right? I'm arguing that in the future, it doesn't have to be. Um, and I think that's just an interesting thing, right? Depending on how they want to move forward with these open world games, if that is a main feature that they want to implement for their future games, they can tell varied stories and use different characters that aren't just strong boss trainers to progress the plot, move the flow along, right? um I guess that's my counterpoint to your counterpoint is, yes, gym leaders in the past were those roadblocks that would allow you to kind of um you know move forward and progress the world and progress your exploration in the world, but it doesn't have to be anymore. I think that's the key.
Well, and there is so much to that idea that maybe we can touch on that in a future cast, because I think that's a really interesting idea. Is there's been so much that could be incorporated into it. I want to be respectful of our audience and our cast, and I'm gonna have us do our outro. And what I would love, so whoever would like to go first, you are welcome to give your outro. I'm also happy to call on someone, but I'd like to end this on a really high note, and ask you to really quick tell us the gym leader that had the most positive impact on you. Like that gym leader that felt indomitable, that battle, that excitement, whoever it may be. Whoever would like to go first, you are welcome to. And I can also call on someone. Fitzy, how about you?
I think we're all trying to think
Oh,
which gym leader actually influenced us to that extent.
no, sorry. I didn't realize I'd muted myself. The whole time Caps was talking, I was having a 5-minute sneezing fit. So
Oh,
Oh no.
I didn't want to impose that on anyone. Um, I think I gotta say I'm gonna be a super basic old Pokemon fan. Um, when I say I think I'd have to go with Brock. Um, like I said earlier in the cast, and like I've said before, I've been a fan of Pokemon since Red and Blue came out. I've watched the anime since the Battle on the SSN preview episode aired. Um, and I feel like Brock is going back to Pokemon being one of my comfort franchises, and Brock is my comfort guy. When I first started Pokemon Red, I picked Charmander as my starter, and Brock was a pain in the butt. And he was, in the anime, he was Ash's rock for 4 generations of the anime. Um, he is, he's the quintessential rock specialist. He's just a steady guy who's there. And I think, you know, approaching Pokemon as that comfort franchise, the reason why, I'm pushing 40 and I'm still a fan of a game I've played since I was 12, is because it's always there for me. And I think no gym leader represents what Pokemon is to me better than Brock and his ever present, calm, sometimes shirtless self.
There's so much to respect there. What about you, Archaic? Do you have an idea yet?
Honestly, no. I mean, the fact that I've treated gym leaders largely as, let's be honest, forgettable mini bosses, like in game terms, like the impacts the gym leaders have had on me have largely been from like their involvement in story and plot, and that's often not come from the anime so much. It's come from, let's say, not from the game so much. It's come more from the anime. So from that sense, I mean, if I have to go with that, then I probably have to say it's Misty, just on the basis of I was one of the original Pokemon shippers, and that was that was how I made my name in the fandom all those years ago. There would be no Bulbagarden and Bulbapedia today if I hadn't been heavily involved in that shipping war. Game-wise, I mean, I'm just going through the list here and thinking, like, okay, well, we've already talked about how Whitney was annoying, but it wasn't like we want positive experiences, and I'm trying to, like, Gen 1, were there any gym leaders with real huge, amazing, positive experiences in the games? Not really. Gen 2, maybe Jasmine. I appreciated that she had a bit more of the story there with the Amethyst and the Lighthouse. Like that was probably the earliest example of that sort of thing we had in the thing. Gen 3, I mean, being like Fitzy, someone pushing 40 now, I can relate to Norman a lot more, despite not having kids myself. But that's not, like, I don't feel like he's had as much development as he could, perhaps. Gen 4, I forget who half these people are. Like, Byron, I do not remember Byron at all. Gen 5, yeah, I mean, again, Bryson for the connection to Star Studios, which I thought was an interesting idea. Iris obviously was huge in the anime.
Well, if you don't have one, that's totally okay. I was gonna
Yeah, I
say,
can't really name one.
I will say, I might go with a little bit of a wild horse. And I think I'm gonna go from Unova, and I have always really liked the gym leader Berg. Part of that is because I felt like both games, his gym designs were really unique. I love I love kind of his whole thing. And to be honest, one of my all-time favorite Gen 5 Pokemon is Lee Vanny, and the fact that Berg got like so much extra attention in the anime, and like Lee Vanny was such an important Pokemon for Ash in the Unova anime. That was always a thing. But due to time, due to all this, I just want to give us our outro as we begin to wrap.
Wait,
Again,
hold
I
on.
am Rhodehawk.
Hold
Oh,
on.
yes, Cap.
I have two. I have two of
Okay.
them. Okay, so in terms of things that have been, I'll be quick. I promise, not rambling like last time. The two gym leaders that stick out to me the most, had the biggest impact on me, were one, Jasmine, as Archaic said, but not from that perspective. Meeting Jasmine in Sunny Shore City in Diamond Pearl Platinum was a really interesting point to me that indicated, as a young player who had not played any of the Johto games by the time he played the Sinnoh games, that the world of Pokemon was far more interconnected than the games kind of lead you to believe. And now looking at that in hindsight, it's very much just an Easter egg, right? But at the time, it was really intriguing because, oh, there was this girl here, and she says she's a gym leader, but I've never heard of her. You know, I played through Fire Red Leaf Green, I played through Emerald, and I never met her. So she must be a gym leader in some other region that I haven't played. So I don't know. I thought that was really cool. And then the second one, I'm gonna say the dynamic between Clay and Elisa in Black and White is really one of my favorite little bits of gym leader development. You know, Driftvale City and Nimbasa City, two major cities in Unova, they're very close to each other, and you know, there's a lot of collaboration between the two in terms of oh well, there's one drawbridge connecting them, and you have to talk to the other person to make sure that you can raise the drawbridge and stuff like that. And I think that helped develop a little bit of kind of that interplay between gym leaders and major trainers in the region, major operators of the region, as we touched on earlier. But yeah, those are my two picks.
All right. I always love it when we get to have those insights. Anyways, so I'm Roadhawk. I'm going to wrap us up here. I'm going to go to each of our people, ask us to give a farewell message. Let us know if there's anything you're excited about on Bulba Garden. If you have anything for Bulba Garden you want to plug. But, okay, I'll go to you first.
Well, it is July 27th as we're recording this, and the Pokemon World Championships are on the 16th of August, so a little under 3 weeks away, which means that the Pokemon Presents for August is only really about 2 and a bit weeks away. So expect another Bulbacast soon with Pokemon Presents predictions, I expect, and I hope to be there for that. It'll be interesting to see how things go here with no... Well, I guess the Legends is considered core series now, but no traditional main series game known or expected going into this. It'll be interesting to see what we get.
And then Fitzy, anything you're excited about? Any last message you want to send the audience?
I'm excited for Return to Kalos. As I said a while back with the Pokemon Presents reaction cast. I love Kalos. I can't wait to go back and spend all my time in Lumiose City. Just as a final farewell, you know, I've been following, not as closely as Caps, but I've been following the chat while we've been talking, and I love talking with other Pokemon fans. So, join us on our Discord, follow us on our social medias. We're on Twitter, X, whichever one you want to call it, Tumblr. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. So, lots of ways to engage with Bulbagarden and discuss things.
And then, as promised, I will say that I'm Rhodehawk. I do these casts on a regular basis. I also provide Pokemon Masters videos on Wednesday and Sunday, and I know that Caps has additional information. So, would you like to do your outro, Caps?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me on, Fitzy Archaic. It's always a blast to have you guys on and chat with you guys. A couple of bits of news for our Twitch audience. My stream tomorrow morning will be canceled. I've decided to just go ahead and cancel it. I'm not gonna have enough time to do a stream before I leave for my vacation. So just to update there. We should still have our regularly scheduled streams for Dawning Winds and ME over the weekend as well. I also wanted to shout out my own series. I've just recently started my 4th game in my Caps Lock series, where my goal is to complete a Nuzlocke of every Pokemon game there is. We've started a Nuzlocke of Pokemon White, so be sure to catch that on Thursdays. And yeah, as Archaic mentioned, we will likely have more Bulbacast content in the month of in the month of August, excuse me. So stay tuned for that for sure. But yeah, that's all for me. Thanks, Rode.
Thank you. And as always, please let us know your thoughts, your ideas. As mentioned so many times, with that, we are going to say goodbye and thank you to our audience and everyone else listening or watching anywhere else.
Cheers, everyone.